One war crime story that was plastered all over Western media is the story you mentioned a moment ago, the mass graves in Mariupol. The story is, of course, that Russian soldiers killed 9 to 10,000 people, buried them in unmarked graves. You went to this
Yeah.
area. You saw it firsthand. What
Yeah.
did you learn when you were there?
Yeah, and I'd like to add to the about the story. So you're right; they've said up to 9 or 10,000 people buried secretly by Russian forces to cover their war crimes. I am emphasizing, of course, the ridiculous quotations, and they've been citing the former mayor of Mariupol, who I have no idea where he is. He's certainly not in Mariupol, as saying this is the worst war crime of the 21st century. And anybody who's been following America's war crimes around the world should be appalled at this claim. And he also made a reference to a World War II crime of 33,000, I think the number was, Jews killed by Nazis. So as I noted in my article that came out on RT recently, this is ludicrous, and it's huge. It's appalling at so many levels because number one, this mayor almost certainly is whitewashing the Nazis in his former city and in Ukraine, and number two, to compare this what they are calling a mass grave to the extermination of 33,000 people in World War II is an abominable lie. What I saw was an existing cemetery, which Western media have noted is there. But then I saw rows of newly dug graves. Now, I don't know when they were dug. I don't know when the people that are buried there, I don't know how they were killed. But I do know at most there were 400 of these new graves. By the way, almost 100 of which were empty. And then amongst these graves were on the graves there were placards when the name was known and date of birth was put, and if the information wasn't available, then they just had numbers. But the interesting thing was, while I was there I was with the RT journalist and his two cameramen, and while I was there, the two men responsible for digging the graves arrived. And we spoke with them. Of course, I don't speak Russian. I'm very clear about that. So my colleague, Roman Kosarev, spoke with them, and I recorded. And they said they were responsible. They knew every person that was buried there. They specifically stated every person was buried in a separate grave with dignity, in the most dignified manner possible, in a coffin. And they even said Ukrainian soldiers were buried there. They're humans as well. My colleague Roman asked them, are you aware of Western allegations? And they said they were really offended by it. And they said that's absolutely a lie. And they again emphasized each person was buried in a coffin in a separate grave. So now, when you say mass grave, I think most people imagine a pit. Well, in fact, that's what this former mayor, the runaway mayor of Mariupol, said. He specifically said a pit of, I think, 30 meters wide and bodies thrown into the pit is what he said. And, that's not what I was told, and that's not what I saw.
Yeah, when I think of a mass grave, I think of World War II, images of World War II, where Jews are just thrown into a pit, nameless and covered up by the Nazis. That's what I think of mass graves, and that's not at all what you experienced.
No. And the other point to note is Mariupol is predominantly ethnic Russian. So just logically, why would the Russian army and the DPR forces go out of their way to exterminate Russians? It doesn't make sense.